They told me the posting was temporary. That was 11 years ago. I came to the Varath Plateau as a farmhand, which is what the border administration called anyone they couldn't classify. My actual work had been soil remediation on the lowland collectives south of the range, turning dead alien ground into something a root could trust. The border office needed a body to manage the waystation while they sorted out the jurisdictional handoff between the Varanthi territories and the new Colonial Survey Commission. 6 months, the deputy commissioner said. Sign here. I signed. The waystation sat at the edge of the plateau's only flat stretch, a squat building of pressed stone and salvaged frame glass, half buried by wind-blown grit on 3 sides. The Varath wind did not relent. It came from the north-facing cliff face, and it ran straight across the plateau floor with nothing to break it. Not a tree, not a ridge, not a wall tall enough to matter. You learned to walk with your shoulders turned into it, or it took your footing. In 12 seasons, I never stopped turning. Inside the waystation, there was a single main chamber, a utility annex, a sleeping alcove, and the room I came to think of simply as the inner room. That room held the Codex. I had been told about it in the briefing. 1 line in a single-page document. Sealed archival unit, basalt pedestal mount, pre-survey origin, no active function recorded. I stood in front of it on my first day and studied it for several minutes. It was roughly the height of my sternum and twice as wide, the stone cover carved with interlocking geometric lines, so fine that the light caught different patterns at different hours. The pedestal was basalt, dark and water-smoothed, older than anything else in the building by a span I could not estimate. No visible seam, no console, no port for a data key. It simply sat there, sealed, in a room that smelled of dry stone and old air. The keepers before me had tried to open it. Their logs were still filed in the annex. 47 entries across 9 rotations, 300 years of intermittent occupation. Technical means, ceremonial approaches, translation guesses from the geometric carvings. One keeper named Desir, who had held the post nearly 8 months before the commission recalled him, simply wrote, "It doesn't want us. Maybe it never did." I read that and understood it as a pragmatic assessment. I left the Codex alone. My work was the waystation itself. The building needed constant attention. The grit worked into every seal and fitting. The frame glass panels required rebedding twice a year. The atmospheric systems had 3 filters that clogged on a monthly rotation. I kept a maintenance log, and I kept it meticulously. Not because anyone read it. By year 3, I knew no one was reading it. But because that was what the post required, and the post was what I had. People asked me, on the rare occasions I made the transit down to the lowland relay station for supplies, why I stayed. I told them I was waiting on the jurisdictional resolution. By year 5, that was no longer true, but I had run out of better answers. The truth was simpler and harder to say. I was the one who was there. The wind came every day. The filters clogged every month. The frame glass settled in its fittings and needed checking, and I was the one who was there to do it. That felt like enough. I did not examine it further. The Codex sat in its room. I cleaned around it. I replaced the atmospheric filter in the inner room on the same schedule as the rest. I noted its physical condition in my log at the start of each season. No change, sealed, no visible degradation, and I moved on. We had an arrangement, the Codex and I, which was that neither of us made any claims on the other. The jurisdictional resolution came in the 11th year, mid-autumn, in the form of a formal letter from the Border Commission, delivered by a courier who clearly found the plateau miserable and wanted to leave immediately. The letter informed me that the Varath boundary had been officially assigned to the new Survey Commission's frontier management body, that the waystation would be assessed for decommission or repurpose in the coming review cycle, that my contract had been concluded with full service credit, and that I was free to depart at my convenience. A transit voucher was enclosed. I held the letter in the wind outside the waystation for a long time. Then I went inside and started packing. It took me most of a day. 11 years of careful living doesn't take up much space, but I had accumulated the small useful things that accumulate in any long posting. Spare filter elements I'd machined myself, reference notes I'd made on the atmospheric system's particular tendencies, a collection of plateau stones I'd brought in from the cliff edge over the years because their shapes interested me. I sorted, packed, set the things I was leaving behind in neat order on the annex shelves for whoever came next, if anyone came next. By the time I had worked through to the inner room, it was evening. The low sun came through the frame glass at a long angle and lay across the Codex cover in pale gold bars, catching the carved lines in a way that shifted as the light moved. I had seen it thousands of times. I stood in the doorway and looked at it one last time. Then I went in to do the final sweep. It was habit. I did not think about it. I checked the atmospheric filter. Clean. I had changed it 3 weeks prior. Noted the condition of the room's seals. Verified the emergency power coupling in the wall mount was properly seated. All correct. All as it should be. I came to the pedestal last. I reached out and laid my right hand flat on the Codex cover. I was not doing anything deliberate. My right boot had developed a loose sole plate that morning, and I was tired from the day's work, and I needed something solid to lean against while I pulled the boot off with my left hand. That was all it was. I put my hand on the Codex because it was there, and it was the right height, and I needed a moment's steadiness. The stone was warm. I went very still. I had touched the Codex before, when I cleaned around it, occasionally when I checked its physical condition. It had always been cool, the temperature of deep stone. This warmth moved under my palm as I stood there, a slow radiance coming up through the carved geometric lines like something waking that had been asleep a very long time. Then the seam appeared. I had spent 11 years unable to find a seam in that cover. It opened now from the center outward, a hairline first, then a widening gap, the stone parting without sound in a motion so deliberate it seemed almost careful. Light came through the gap, deep pale gold, sourceless, steady. Not the orange of the sunset at the window, something older than that. Something that had been waiting inside the stone for longer than the waystation had stood on this plateau. The cover settled back fully, and the light filled the room. I stood with my hand still extended, my boot half off, my weight on one foot, and I watched the light move. It organized itself, that is the only word I have for it, into patterns above the open Codex, geometric arrangements that matched and then elaborated the carved lines on the cover, stacking and interlocking in 3 dimensions, until they formed something I could not name but could follow. A structure, a record, something enormous rendered in quiet light in a small stone room on a plateau that most maps had stopped marking. Then it spoke. Not in any language I could identify. The sound came as vibration, as much as voice, felt in the sternum before it reached the ears, and somewhere in the translation between those 2 points, my mind found the meaning. It spoke once, in full, without preamble, sovereign of the between. The light held for a moment. Then it gentled, easing back from the organized brilliance down to a soft, even glow that sat steady in the open Codex, like a lamp that had finally found its wick. I stood there in my socked feet on the cold stone floor, boot in my left hand, right hand still held out in the air where the Codex cover had been. The waystation was quiet. The wind moved against the frame glass outside with its usual patient pressure. The filter ran. The lights in the annex were on because I had not yet switched them off. I thought about the 47 log entries. I thought about Desir's assessment. It doesn't want us. Maybe it never did. I thought about 11 years of atmospheric filters and loose frame glass and plateau stones lined up on my sill. 11 years of being the one who stayed, because someone had to be the one who stayed. 11 years of no change, sealed, no visible degradation. All of it was still true. Nothing I had done had been anything other than what it appeared to be. And apparently that had been, the entire time, exactly what was required. I lowered my hand. I looked at the Codex where it sat open in its warm light. I picked up my boot and pulled it back on. Then I sat down on the stone floor of the inner room, back against the pedestal, and let the weight of what I had unknowingly been settle into me the way the plateau grit settled into everything, slowly, and all the way down, and permanent. I did not leave that night.